I don't think I'd still be here.
Oh, Emily, I'm so sorry to hear you say that. Well, listen, shall we get cracking on it and put a call into the government about this situation? If you want us to.
Sorry.
It's all
I
right.
didn't expect that.
Well, it's such
thank you.
Well, it's such a crazy story. My producer will speak to you once you're off air, and because it's. I mean, from your perspective, it is absolutely appalling. From a journalist's perspective, what you've just revealed is the kind of idiocy and nonsense that comes out of the politics of loathing foreigners. A sort of nationalistic politics produces situations like Emily's. That's what it produces, and badly run departments that are all full of, just full on computer says no, produce situations like Emily is facing. How appalling. A talented young woman, born here, lived here all her life, is made to stop working because her paperwork hasn't been formalised. I mean, seriously. There are barely any words for it, are there? Emily, thank you. She's having a conversation now with our producer, so she'll be fine. And we will return to Emily's story, for sure. It's 2:32 headlines from Tim Humphrey.
A terrorist who stabbed a stranger to death in an attack motivated by the conflict in Gaza has been sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 44 years. Ahmed Ali Alid had tried to kill his housemate before prowling the streets of Hartlepool and stabbing grandfather Terence Carney. The Chancellor isn't making any guarantee taxes will definitely come down if the Conservatives win the general election, but Jeremy Hunt's repeated his intention to scrap national insurance altogether if it's affordable, although Labour's wondering how that can be achieved. A temporary pier built by the US is now up and running off the coast of Gaza. If operations run smoothly, the floating structure could receive 150 extra trucks of aid a day. And we're just hearing that Plaid Cymru has ended its cooperation agreement with the Welsh Labour government with immediate effect. LBC weather, sunny spells and showers. Those could be heavy in Scotland, a high of 20 degrees.
LBC. When Brian and Sheila from Worthing sold their car with Motorway, they got more money. They then used that extra money to buy a camper van so that their dog Bruce could enjoy a lot more nature. Bruce, come here, boy. So, Bruce, are you happy your owners used Motorway? Oh, Bruce, you can't use language like that on the radio. Sell your car the more money way, where 84% of sellers sold for more. Motorway. Validated against 2 independent sources. Visit motorway.co.uk/claims.
The British Red Cross is here to welcome people fleeing the conflict in Ukraine.
We're here to help people to safety when the storms hit.
We're here to show anyone struggling that someone cares.
Oh yeah, that's a huge help.
We're here for humanity. With your support, the Red Cross has helped millions of people in the UK and 190 other countries. Search British Red Cross to support us. Together, we are the world's emergency responders.
The Hillary sale just got even better. Save up to 40% off hundreds of made-to-measure styles. Plus, book your appointment by the 20th of May for an extra 10% off everything, including our new collection of beautiful Roman blinds and curtains. Our advisors take care of all the measuring and fitting, and with blinds starting from just £50, that's a fabulous finish at great value. Book your free in-home appointment today. Visit hillarys.co.uk. Don't forget, Hillary's extra 10% off ends 20th of May. Conditions apply.
Nothing beats a Jet2 holiday. And right now, you can save up to £120 per couple. So, escape to sunny favourites like Greece, Portugal and Italy. And get 22 kilograms of baggage included. Book summer now with Jet2 Holidays. Package holidays you can trust. And international protected. Subject to availability and conditions.
A long way to get from here to here on a day when nothing works, you know?
Well, I managed it. You're here. People can do stuff when they want to. You know how we find out if it's really her? We go and look. Got it? Well, I'm going to go and see about keeping this place locked up until we get back. You try and find your balls when I get that sorted.
Cosford. If you have any ambulances going near Cosford, do you think you could let me tag along?
Not likely to send anything out that way. Sorry. Good luck.
We need to move quickly.
It's 20, aren't we?
With our plan.
What's our plan?
That's exactly it. What is our plan? We're small, but pebbles still make big ripples. We have to be smart, strike, and get away. We're in the camouflage of the oppressor. That's great. So, targets.
Are there government offices in Birmingham? There's a big BBC building.
They've pushed their agenda for long enough, that's for sure. We think it's big enough. We want the eyes of the world on us. We might not get many chances at this. We could change history. What's big enough to make the world sit up and notice?
Did they make the one show here?
Control to all units, head to RAF Cosford. The PM's plane is there, plus a lot of press. We can prioritise security. Repeat, if you're not in the middle of the virus,
find me a map.
RAF Cosford to protect the Prime Minister.
Pupillary assessment, both equal and reactive. 4 millimeters bilaterally. Do you feel sick at all, Mr. Cavalli? Like you might vomit?
Straight shock.
Can you squeeze my hands for me now? And can you stop me from pushing down on them?
I've got to stop. I've got to stop.
Yes. And now just give them a call. That was about 4 out of 5, no worsening.
Mr. Cavalli, I need you to answer some questions.
I'm Bruce Willis.
You tried phoning the Chancellor last time, do you remember that?
I think I was hit by a kebab shop.
You said you knew what the problem was.
Oh, yes.
What has happened? What was the problem?
Buying chocolate on my own on Valentine's Day.
No, not that.
A lonely egg. Everyone I ever clicked with, I don't think they ever really liked me.
Mr. Cavalli, the money.
The money?
Where is it?
Inside pocket. It was £17 chocolate.
What? All the money in the world is missing, and you said you knew why. Yes or no?
Yeah?
I'm not letting you find her, mate. I'm gonna do one thing right today. I swear to God I will.
Hey! Where are you going? That's ours! No, don't. I'm sick of everyone running out on me. Oh, my little.
Please stop. Oh, no. Not now. No. You're too much away. Stay in there. You're please. Oh.
Can't take your call right now.
No. Oh.
Hello?
Adam. Oh, thank you.
Hello?
Can you...
Yeah, got you. This is Adam's phone. Leave a message. What's up?
Oh.
Hello?
Are you nearby? Do you still have the truck?
What, for me? Who is it?
It's Grace. I helped you and your friend earlier.
I've been trying to reach you.
Do you still have the truck?
What phone are you using?
Ross, my waters are broken. I'm having my baby. I need a bloody vehicle.
You're all just taking these huge changes in, but hearing this for the first time, this will be pretty shocking.
I don't want my church on them. I thought the really good thing I could do for the country is just 4 years of just sensible, normal stuff. I mean, isn't that what we all want? Some people might want things to be better. It wasn't really my mandate, though, was it? It was mostly no more of that other stuff. A lot less of the annoying things. They weren't even supposed to win the election. A protest vote isn't supposed to actually work. Okay,
If this Pascal Cavalli thing goes right, you might be able to go down to that podium and just list off all the things we're going to do to put Britain back on track.
I've got the man from MI5 on the phone. They're putting you through to Mr. Cavalli now. And, I need my vape back for a moment. Oh, God, he's no help, is he?
Hello?
Is that Pascal Cavalli?
Mr. PM.
Mr. Cavalli?
Doctor.
Yes.
No, I am. Who? Talking to the PM.
Oh, fantastic. Dr. Cavalli, I understand you might be able to help us. You ran a scenario for a government think tank about what happens if all the money disappears.
That's right.
I was hoping we could hear some of your findings.
Yes, definitely don't let it happen. Chaos, awful stuff. I picked Saints Days, you see. That's how I knew.
Knew what?
We ran a simulation. The main encounter, 2025, February 14th.
You came in at some time in 1999, I'm told.
1999, that's years ago. How long have I been unconscious?
What happened in this simulation?
We left it on.
How do you mean?
A war game.
Nobody turned it off.
It was frightfully clever. The machine, not us. Did anyone pick up the chocolate after I was run over?
The date you gave it was 14th of February 2025.
That's today, I think. It's not 1999 like that woman said.
Could it have acted out the scenario in real life if it had been unsupervised all this time?
It was frightfully clever. And I tell you, I hit my head.
Cavalli, I think we're going to have to call you back. Can you just...
Was anyone able to make sense of that?
Hell, Chris! You should have listened to me when you had the chance. I was trying to be good. I was trying to do the right thing.
Oh, you need to help me. Please.
You have to hang up. This is the phone. He knows where you are. He's always going looking for you.
Who is?
Your psycho husband.
Okay, so we have an actual government server somewhere.
Doing a thing that the government told it to do?
And by running this simulation and not turning it off properly, we've shot ourselves and the entire planet in the foot.
This cannot be.
Grasping onto the weight of the crown.
BBC Radio 4. So, is someone in the UK government responsible for the massive financial cyber hack? We'll find out in the final episode of Money Gone at the same time next Friday afternoon, or if you prefer, you can listen to the whole series right now on BBC Sounds.
The travel industry is booming. Global tourism is on the rise, and I'm not surprised. The excitement of discovering a new place is a feeling like no other. But here's the thing. Are we ruining the natural beauty, local communities and attractions we seek out so keenly? I'm Rajan Datta. Having explored the world, I'm now exploring how we can stop over-tourism, protect destinations and the environment from the negative impacts of travel. The Tourist Trap, with me, Rajan Datta, starting on Monday morning at 11 on BBC Radio 4 and BBC Sounds.
Well, now, in Child, India Rakeson examines infant motor development and asks whether milestones are a thing of the past.
What is exciting and why do I think infant movement is so beautiful and brilliant? A lot of the time it's just watching a baby discover some simple thing for the first time, and it's happening in our lab and we're capturing it on videotape.
There's something about movement in babies that is spellbinding. The tentative shuffle of a foot, the rocking of knees.
Sometimes it's something I've never seen before, but often it's something that this baby has never done before and that parent has never seen before, and it's a joyful thing that we get to share in that, that revelation and in that discovery with the parent. It's really everything.
Babies begin with those kicks and rolls in the womb, to lying in arms for weeks, reaching and pushing, but not on the move. And then, bit by bit, for many,
their little arms and legs switch into gear, and suddenly the opportunity for movement and discovering the world on their terms begins.
Everyone had always believed that babies, like adults, are moving because they have some goal, they have some destination in mind. And it turns out that's not the case at all. You can put a baby in a completely empty room and they still run around just as much as in a room filled with toys.
Karen Adolph is Professor of Psychology and Neuroscience at the New York University Action Lab and is renowned for her research in infant motor development. She spends a lot of time looking at the ways that babies move, watching them approach drop-offs, attempt slopes, perceive the space around them.
No one really knows why babies take their first crawling or walking steps, or make their first reach, or any other skill for that matter.
One of the big first forms of movement in many babies is crawling. These little beings start to use their hands and knees to sort of scuttle across the ground, and it's fascinating. This human compulsion to reach out, to go forward in whatever way we can. So it's not surprising that baby motor skills is an area that's been examined and charted significantly over the years. These very physical, tangible moments, which some might call milestones.
The problem with this kind of view of motor development is that it implies that there's an obligatory age-related sequence that every baby in every culture, everywhere in the world, has to do.
I'm Indy Rackson, and you're listening to Child from BBC Radio 4, episode 23, Crawling.
He's about a week and a half ago started to try and take steps, so that's another exciting developmental stage for him. He's been crawling since he was about 6 months old, so yeah, that's been fun.
So we're at 9 months old now, and by this point a baby might be crawling, maybe standing and walking with assistance, or even alone. But they are not all doing the same things.
Does it matter if different babies learn to move in different ways? So my friend's kid was an absolute bum shuffler and we loved him for it. Brilliant. Some people do tripod crawling. There's all different types on there.
There's no good evidence that doing any of it matters once they start walking. What there is good evidence for is that a mobile baby, a baby who can get around however they figure out how to do it, has different opportunities for learning than a baby who is stationary. Does it matter whether you get those opportunities at 8 months or 10 months or 12 months? Probably not.
But what most parents can attest to is that expectation can weigh really heavy when raising a child. We can easily get anxious about what our babies can and can't do, and that could come from your own parents, your friends, or the society around you.
Cultural norms feed into parents' expectations. What should a healthy, typically developing baby do at this point in their life? And then parents set up the environment and their own interactions to make those things come to fruition. Western cultures value literacy, and that feeds into parents' expectations that reading is good and that you should teach your child how to read. And so we begin reading to our babies. Some people are reading to their fetus in their belly, or reading to our newborns and neonates long before we expect that they can, glean anything specific from the pictures or the words. So it's the same thing with motor development. If your culture thinks it's important to ride a bike, your 2-year-old will be riding a bike. Or if you're in Northern Europe, your 2-year-old will be on skis. So all of this is very culturally situated and historically situated.
And that also goes for different outlooks on early physical movement. So the NHS advice is to be really careful of a baby's neck until they can support it on their own.
But in other cultures, the babies are forced to support their own limbs or their own head against gravity. And all of that is making the baby stronger and giving the baby better balance control.
Here's another great example. Karen and her team looked at the expectations of caregivers in the 1980s in Cameroon.
The caregivers had such strong expectations about how well their babies could sit that they would leave their 5-month-olds perched on adult-sized furniture like a bench and then leave the room to do things. And although leaving children in high places is not something that's recommended, it intrigued Karen.
I remember watching that with my colleagues and we were thinking, what?
I left my 2.5-year-old on the kitchen counter for like 1 minute when I made some toast the other day, and I was going, don't move, don't move, don't move, don't move.
No, but so the caregivers' expectations, you know, neatly matched onto what their babies really could do and would do. So in, you know, the hundreds of hours of video, we never saw a baby fall off a high place.
That's amazing.
And here's another form of expectation I think we'll all be familiar with: milestones. You might have seen baby milestone charts where different stages of an infant's development are marked along increasing months. Things like holding your head up, sitting, crawling, walking. They help pediatricians and caregivers know what skills a child should have developed by a certain age. But just how helpful or even unhelpful milestones actually are is increasingly being questioned.
The problem with this kind of view of motor development is that it implies that there's an obligatory age-related sequence that every baby in every culture, everywhere in the world, has to do. The average baby is no baby at all. It's a statistic. It's not a real person. Real babies can exhibit various skills in various orders. They can skip skills, they can revert to old skills, and so on.
And another problem with milestones:
it assumes that there's like some day, some puntate point, some point in this baby's history when before that point the baby couldn't do the skill, and then after that point the baby could do the skill. As if motor skill acquisition is like turning on a faucet. Skills sort of sputter into an infant's repertoire. And crawling in particular is not a good way to think about a milestone because crawling is so variable and it's so hard to define. If it's not a reliable measure, then it's not going to help you to do any kind of diagnostic or anything that would forward public health, right? And that's why the U.S. Center for Disease Control has dropped crawling from their index of so-called milestones.
Crawling was dropped by the CDC in February 2022, a move that was greeted with varied reactions. Many agreed with Karen's points and noted that in some cultures, including our own, babies don't always crawl before they walk. But others argue that crawling should happen before walking. And if it doesn't, it's a red flag that something else might be wrong with, say, their feet or their reflexes.
They believe this so much that they will provide therapy to teach older children who maybe have cerebral palsy or some kind of a developmental disability to crawl before they're encouraging these children to stand up and face the world upright.
Of course, the Centre for Disease Control and Prevention aren't the only people to have laid out milestones. In 2006, the World Health Organization published their multi-centre growth reference study, which showed windows of achievement for 6 gross motor milestones for infants.
That was the first attempt of the World Health Organization to really try to standardize a way to capture development.
This is Dr. Vanessa Cavallera. She's a medical doctor working in the Brain Health Unit at the World Health Organization. Who were the babies that this 2006 data set was built on? Because this is the World Health Organization. How broad was that data set?
That data set was about 800 children, and it was data collected from 5 different countries.
800 children from 5 countries doesn't seem like a lot to me, in that, you know, if you think about the cultural diversity across the nearly hundreds of countries that we have on this planet, that strikes me as quite small to develop global similarities.
What is happening now is that we agree that it was not rigorous enough in a sense. It was rigorous for the purpose of what it was. It was not a standard at the time. That was not the purpose of that study. Now, this is what we're doing. So now we're in 12 countries, covering all regions of the world, and we're collecting data on over 4,000 children.
So, 18 years on, and things are changing at the World Health Organization.
We're actually moving away from milestones. We're actually moving into more formalized assessment. So we're really moving towards holistic assessment of children.
They're currently working on sets of normative curves like you might see for height and weight, coupled with individual focus questions to help monitor child development. The aim is to find a better way for paediatricians to identify when children might require intervention and support.
So the idea is that creating a standard, this is what every child can aim to achieve. And this is our responsibility to take them there. It's actually measurement for us is holding decision makers, policy makers, implementers accountable. Because if you have no data, there's no action. So you need to know how things are going, so you know how to intervene. You know, the percentage of children under 5 that are on or off track, governments are asked to report on this so that interventions can be made. I would say it's an achievement that this has become something that governments are requested to report on. It's a shift because I think the idea was always that child development was too complex. And it is complex, but there are ways to measure it, there are ways to intervene, and if we're not taking action, it's on us.
Vanessa tells me these new normative curves should be published in 2026. It feels like a way away, but there are new resources that can already be used. Meanwhile, of course, the milestone charts are still on the website and in doctors' rooms too.
I don't think they're obsolete overall. The message is use them to observe your child.
They can be a helpful way to spot developmental delays or raise a flag.
They're also a mean to ask for help. And that's something that I think sometimes is a challenge. There's so much stigma and, you know, everybody wants their child to do well and to be the first in the class, but actually development, especially in the early years, looks very different. Every child has its own trajectory and it's totally fine. Our job is just to help them thrive within their trajectory. So use it more as a conversation generator. Use them more as an indication and a guidance on how to support the child rather than a test.
You've been listening to Child with me, India Ackerson. The producer was Georgia Ander. This was a Listen production for BBC Radio 4.
And you can hear the next episode of Child, which is all about attachment, at the same time next week.
I said to my optometrist recently, you and me are actually quite similar, because I'm a comedian and my new show Michael Spicer No Room on BBC Radio 4 promises a mix of brilliant topical sketches and characters. And he said, so what? So I explained our shared goal in life is to make people see the world differently. But he said, that's tenuous. Just read the bottom line. So I said XFDQYE, and he laughed and said, I hope your satire is sharper than your eyesight. You can have that one. I hate it when people say that.
Michael Spicer, No Room.
He doesn't wear glasses either. Optometrists who don't wear glasses are just gloating for it.
Starts on Radio 4 and BBC Sounds tomorrow night at 11. Is there any way to get rid of slugs without killing them? Find out after the news in Gardener's Question Time. BBC News at 3 o'clock. An asylum seeker from Morocco who was found guilty of murdering a 70-year-old stranger and trying to kill a housemate has been jailed for life. Ahmed Alaei, who is 45, had told police the attacks in Hartlepool last October were in revenge for the war between Israel and Hamas. He will spend a minimum of 45 years in prison. Ali was sentenced at Teesside Crown Court by Mr. Justice Roshana Krupp.
You attacked and murdered Terence Carney in a terrorist act. You intended it as revenge for the actions of a foreign country, Israel, and to intimidate and influence the British government in its international relations. You hoped to frighten the people of Britain and to undermine the freedoms they enjoy.
Police in France have shot dead a man who tried to set fire to a synagogue in the northwestern city of Rouen. The French Interior Minister, Gérald Darmanin, said when officers arrived at the building, they were confronted by a man wielding a knife and an iron bar. The first consignments of aid to be delivered using a temporary pier have been taken ashore in Gaza. The United States said about 500 tons of supplies would enter Gaza in the coming days. Russia's ambassador in London has accused the UK of being a de facto participant in the Ukraine war because of the weapons it's supplying to Kyiv. Andre Klein also said the UK was sharing real-time intelligence with Ukraine. Newham Council has said a full investigation will be conducted into the death of a 5-year-old boy who fell from an apartment block in East London yesterday. The boy has been named locally as Ali Makayoun. The men's world #1 golfer, Scottie Scheffler, has been released after being handcuffed by police as he tried to reach the Valhalla course in Kentucky. He's due to play on the second day of the PGA Championship. Local media is reporting that the player attempted to ignore a police cordon after a road accident which he was not involved in. BBC News.
In 3/4 of an hour, we've got a short story about a mystery illness. It's by Hayley Atwell, who won the BBC Young Writers Award in 2020. You can hear An Affliction at 4:15. Now though, Peter Gibbs and his green-fingered team of horticultural experts answer some gardening queries in Gardener's Question Time.
They say in gardening, you never stop learning. And today we visit a location where learning is the main line of work. Trinity is a college of the University of Oxford, one of the world's great centres of knowledge. But it's not just spires that do the dreaming here. The visionary gardens of Trinity have a long and distinguished history of their own. And here to tell us about the manicured and open green space here at college is head gardener Kate Burtonwood. Hello, Kate.
Hello.
Well, thanks for inviting us here. It's an amazing space that we're actually standing in. I'm sure most of the Oxford colleges boast beautiful gardens, but tell us about the space that we're in here.
The entire site is about 6 acres, but more than half of that is just pure gardens. The 2 lawns that we've got in front of us are both about 2,500 metres of lawn. So Trinity was just outside the city walls when it was founded in 1555, and in fact before that there was a monastic institution on the site which was founded I think 1290, called Durham College. So yeah, really you get that sense that Oxford has grown around us, and now Parks Road and Broad Street, which border the college, are these really quite main thoroughfares. But there's a real sense of privacy within the college.
And the gardens are still evolving, and I understand that one of our very own GQT panellists is involved in that evolution.
Yes, so I think we're all now signed up members of the Chris Beardshaw fan club, I think, here at Trinity. We have this enormous 800 square metre border which has really sort of sat out of use while this sort of 6 years of building projects have happened, with a large new building including an auditorium where we're recording Gardener's Question Time, restoration of our pouring kitchens, then the addition of ground source heat pumps. So all that has had a huge impact on the gardens and on the border area we have. So luckily for us is an area that Chris then was willing to take on. So we're very much looking forward to a really exciting final twist to our story at the moment.
Well, Mr. Beardshaw is always up for a challenge, so we'll follow that one very closely. And in fact, we'll hear from you later in the programme to explore more of the gardens with Chris Beardshaw. But now, joining Chris inside the De Jager Auditorium are 2 more gardening scholars. From Lancashire, it's learned plantswoman Christine Wharton, and from just across the road, Oxford Botanic Gardens, Dr. Chris Thorogood, a critical Chris Mass, and your Gardener's Question Time panel. And who has our first question, please?
Hello, I'm Sue Burge. I'm from the Horton-cum-Studley Gardening Club. Now, we have a very tense competition in our village, and I need to win. We have to grow a potato in a bucket, and there is a weigh-in in the autumn, and the person with the most potatoes wins. Now, I don't think there's anybody else listening from Horton-cum-Studley who could possibly learn from what the panel are going to say, but I need to win. So how do I maximise the production of potatoes in my bucket, please?
You're clearly not at all competitive.
Not at all competitive.
Okay, thank you, Sue. Well, let's see what we can do for you, Christy.
Look, the decent spud, there's nothing like it. It's at back end weighing them all out and everybody having a go at each other. The real key to success with potatoes in a container is planting them basically about a third of the depth of the container and start them off at that depth. And then as they fume, as the stems grow, keep filling it up and keep them well watered and well fed. Don't allow it to get dry, because if it's dry, they'd go semi-dormant. So make sure that you stick that way down your finger, right down, and make sure that it's damp where the tuber is likely to be forming, not where you think it is near the surface. So plenty of moisture and just keep them in growth.
Thank you. We have a problem though. It's already grown above the level of the bucket.
Now you have got a problem. Now what I suggest you do is start again. And you've got time to start again, so I'll do it.
Thank you.
And as you're going to start again, I wonder, Sue, if you might cheat. It's
Yes.
a shame we're bringing this out on the radio, isn't it? Because you could, if the rules are lax enough, think about growing a sweet potato and grow it indoors and give it plenty of heat and plenty of warmth. And then you'll win the weigh-in.
Yeah, I don't think the rules allow that, I'm afraid. Potatoes are issued.
Taxonomically, we'd have an issue with that. It's a very different vegetable, but still.
Can I also just say that I agree entirely with Christine. It's all about getting enough moisture in and at depth, which becomes increasingly difficult as you earth up. So what I would suggest, if you do start again, is to get a piece of perforated land drainage pipe and to put that down the side of the container and then coil it around the base, because that gives you the opportunity to water deep into the container. So every time you water, instead of watering the compost, you put your watering can or your hose pipe into the upright part of the perforated pipe. You can fill the pipe, so you'll get several litres of water, which, because it's perforated pipe, will then gradually leach out into the surrounding soil. Failing that, I think a farmer's market would be the place to go. And just, because you can artistically arrange the tubers to look as though you've grown them. And or maybe, on the journey to the weigh-in, there was a speed bump and suddenly, there was a bit of upheaval, but these are all the ones that I've grown.
Well,
so I think there's two options there. Start again or just visit the farmer's market.
That's very helpful. I'll let you know the outcome. Thank you so much.
Thank you and good luck. Let's take another question.
Alan Evans from the Trap Ground Allotment Society in Oxford. What can I plant now that is fast growing and not a conifer that will replace our moth-eaten box hedge?
Yes, groans of recognition there from around the audience. Yeah, box moth, Chris Thorogood, has become a big problem, hasn't it, over recent years?
Yes, it has. I was actually examining some just recently in Oxford, not far from the Botanic Garden, and you can see just how devastating it can be. Could you tell us a little bit more about the aspect of the site?
It's south-facing, not particularly wet. It's quite a well-drained location.
Okay, I would take advantage of those wonderful conditions. So south-facing and well-drained means that you can grow something that likes a lot of warmth. And I'm wondering about actually a hibiscus even. You could grow several of those and it would be really impactful. It's very different to what you've got at the moment, but there's one called Hibiscus cynosyriacus, which has these a sort of magenta colour flower, I think I'd describe it, and it's quite exotic looking, and I think it would really give you some impact, because I think you've got such a wonderful spot there, Alan, that it would be a shame to grow something very pedestrian there. So that would be my suggestion. Go for something exotic and make the most of that great spot you have.
Chris Beatrice?
Well, as a direct replacement for something like box, people have tried all sorts of things, and one of the things that you'll very often get offered is Ilex crenata. That's fine in some circumstances, but it's not overly successful. It does prefer a slightly acidic soil, and it does prefer well-drained but constantly moist, and that's not necessarily the situation that most of us have when we're looking for a replacement for box. I would say myrtus would be the thing to go. Grow a myrtle. Myrtus apiculata is a really good form and takes very heavy clipping, reasonably quick growing. Will get up to a significant size if you allow it, but will also stay at around about sort of 45, 50, 60 centimetres, the sort of traditional Buxus height.
And I've had great success with that in the garden. And to give you some idea, our coolest temperature where I am in the Cotswolds, -15 on a very heavy clay soil, windswept from every direction, and contrary to just about every encyclopedia, that plant does really well. So I would suggest Myrtus.
And I would sort of keep the slightly unusual feel going with some of the Lucas Burnhams. They've done remarkably well at trials at Wisley. The Teucrians would do well. The silver foliage being particularly attractive. And interestingly, some of the dwarf rhododendrons that are on dwarf rooting stocks can make a fantastic hedge. Clip immediately after flowering, and they keep their habits. A lot of them, there's one called Cunningham White that will tolerate alkaline soils up to pH 8.5. So it's worth looking at some of those dwarf, newer rhododendron species, because there's some belters around.
Spoiled for choice, Salem.
Yeah, that's great.
Hope it works well for you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Over here.
Hello, I'm Lucy Smith from Kidlington in Oxford. And I was just wondering if there's a way to avoid killing slugs, because I had a bit of a disaster in my Brussels last year.
But you're not keen to, put an end to it?
Yes, yeah.
Well, I use beer traps, so at least they have a happy. But it's not quite what you're looking for. Yeah. Christy.
When you say they took your sprouts,
yes,
are you talking about young plants, very young plants? All I'm questioning is it's very unusual for slugs to annihilate sprouts. Yeah. And I'm just wondering if that's what did you see them on the
Yes,
plant?
I did, yes, yeah.
Lots of them?
Yes, yeah. They didn't particularly grow very big either, my sprouts. I put it down to the slugs damage, and would that be what it was?
No.
No. Oh.
Oh, I'd be very surprised if it was. Let me put it that way. I mean, slugs don't normally go for brassicas once they're established. So that's why I'm just questioning this. Was there plenty of slime around? Were there slime trails on the soil?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, well, let's go with slugs if that's what. But I mean, I'm rather surprised, and I mean, the other way is to put something that's going to attract them rather than the sprouts. So I would be putting things like carrot peelings and stuff like that as an alternative, and just keep them well fed that way. And then you can feed them up and do whatever you like with them. But I'm surprised at the novelty of Brussels sprouts.
Can I? Sorry, no. I was just going to say I'm interested to know why you don't want to kill them, because every other person in the room is very happy.
I'm vegan, so.
Okay, so you just don't want to needlessly allow them to come to a grim end. Can I suggest that you get chickens?
Oh.
So we have some chickens at home.
Yeah.
And and they were given a rather well, but they turned up their nose at the sprouts because generally, did you know they don't eat brass? Did you know that? Yeah, I heard that. I can't remember where I heard that.
Can I imagine where you heard that?
So what we've done is just to let our chickens go free range in the garden.
Right, yeah.
And so we've. It's not a massive, collection of chickens. There's 3 of them, and they just roam around. And there's not a single sign of any slugs or snails on anything like the hostas, pelagonatums, those sorts of things. All of that sort of stuff that you'd expect to just get annihilated. Absolutely cleaned the garden out, and they've been roaming around the garden since the autumn, and they've just systematically taken away anything which is going to nibble on the plants, but they've also taken away all the annual weeds as well. So they've done a great job. I'm a big fan of free-range chickens.
There are deterrents for slugs, aren't there?
So I think there are things you could do. We certainly wouldn't encourage you to put down pellets and things. It sounds like you're not, so that's great. I would be vigilant and look out for other pests as well, because these plants are a magnet for pests, not notoriously for slugs and snails, which is why I think we're just sort of wondering if there might be other things at play as well. So I keep an eye out, stay vigilant. And sort of persevere, really, Lucy.
Yes, yeah.
It's also worth bearing in mind that some of the options for slug and snail control sound as though they're very friendly, and actually they can be pretty gruesome. So, for instance, the nematodes, which you can get, which will knock out slugs, they eat the slug from the inside out, and so there's a good option, but it's not necessarily a very option.
Given the
Yeah, so you know, sometimes just kind of picking them up and cycling to the end of the village and putting them in the stream somewhere is a bit more friendly.
Yeah. Well, good luck with a never-ending battle anyway, Lucy. Thanks for your question. Who's next?
Hi, I'm Sophia Ferdini from Germany, now gardening at Elderstubs allotments in Oxford. And I have a rather basic question. So I'm wondering, what's your favorite and absolutely least favorite tomato variety? Because I just moved here to the UK and I love my homegrown tomatoes from my lovely continental summers in Germany. And I'm just wondering what varieties thrive well here, if at all.
Okay. So you've had a lot of success with tomatoes in Germany.
Yes, I have.
Originally. What varieties would you have used?
I love my Bull's Heart tomatoes, I think they're called, and like cherry tomatoes, red marble, they're called in Germany, like a wild variety that you can grow without protection. So I don't have a greenhouse. That's maybe also a factor that makes it more difficult.
Yeah. Chris Beardshaw, favourites and not so favourite?
Well, least favourite, Moneymaker. An old my grandfather used to grow it, and it just occupied he had a lovely cedarwood glasshouse, and it was just the principal crop in his cedarwood glasshouse. He used to grow that and Elsa Craig, and so both really old forms. And I just remember the Moneymakers that he grew as being sort of big, dry, flowery, tasteless. I mean, it was a bit like the joy of eating polystyrene. It was you know, completely pointless. Big, I mean, you know, enormous, the size of melons, but tasteless. And I would say favourite, Brandywine, I actually really like. But growing in my glasshouse, unheated glasshouse, for absolute reliability, I mean, I find that there's very little, especially in the cherry tomato department, that beats something like Gardener's Delight, which just performs year in, year out, and is a constant cropper. So it's not overly glamorous, but it just does the job.
It tastes lovely.
Thank you.
Christy?
My favourite is Fungold, because I like the slightly acidic flavour of that tomato. Tomatoes are very subjective in their taste, and the acidity levels increase and decrease depending on varietal influence and size of plant. The cherry tomatoes tend to have more acidity than the larger tomatoes, and it's down to taste really. And I would suggest that you grow a whole selection of different ones, and then when you find one you're really keen on, stick with it. Different seasons can also have an effect as well. But the greater the concentration of sun, obviously the greater the concentration of sweetnesses and carbohydrates and starches that are produced. So it depends on the season. If it stays like this, they'll all be soppy and miserable and slush.
Welcome to the challenges of British gardening. Well, thanks for those answers, panel. More of keen gardeners here at Trinity College in Oxford soon. Oxford's quadrangles, or quads, are amongst the most celebrated and visited in the world. Each quad is a square or rectangular open space, partially or completely enclosed by buildings, and each comes with its own set of gardening challenges that home gardeners will be familiar with, such as working with bright sun or deep shade. Couple that with tradition and buildings that are hundreds of years old, and suddenly maintaining these quads becomes almost a forensic task. Well, earlier today, designer and GQT regular Chris Beardshaw rejoined head gardener Kate Burtonwood to talk about the challenges Chris faces in his redesign of Trinity's North Lawn border.
Well, do you know, it's great to see this border with the geotextile peeled back and a bit of soil. I think for many months that I've been visiting, there's been no soil visible, but here we are with a bit of soil next to the lawns.
So this essentially is the back lawns of Trinity that we're standing on at the moment. This is the last bit of college that you come to if you come in the correct way and don't sneak in the students' entrance at the back.
I like the fact that actually back lawns plays down just how grand it is. It sounds like a little patch of green behind, you know, tucked away. Actually, this is the main view of the college, because from Parks Road through the very ornate gates, looking on an axial path which runs parallel to the border we're standing on at Christopher Wren's Garden Quad, which is just one of the views of Oxford. One of the things that you said to me right at the beginning, don't make it too complicated to maintain. I mean, that was absolutely the thing I went home with when I first met you, which was, you know, it's got to be not just achievable, but you've got to be able to manage and maintain.
an idea. I have an absolutely wonderful team here, and their skill and expertise sort of shines out across the gardens. But exactly, I think within that I've got a bit of a duty to almost make sure they don't have something which they then can't perform on, and they can't sort of show their skill if it becomes sort of too much or too complicated. So it's wonderful to hear, you know, a designer listening to that as well, and the needs of the gardeners who are going to tend this spot. I think as well, it's, you know, that concept of a herbaceous border is very interesting, because what the empty space that we're standing in now proves is that this is a space where a traditional herbaceous border has not worked. There are no plants left here at the moment. You know, some of them were removed at the point where we went into a building project, but really it was a border that had largely died back. You know, it's either too dry or too exposed, or in parts too shaded for some of those plants that come into people's heads when they dream of an English country garden.
And the principle really of the new border is that we're using largely herbaceous perennials, some grasses, some ferns and bulbous, and the occasional smattering of trees and shrubs, just to elevate and give us a little bit of punctuation through the border. But I suppose the big difference between what we're attempting here and the traditional border is that we're not going for those big extravagant scallops of shape where one plant stood in one spot, performed its role and then died back, and another one took over somewhere else on the border. We are mixing plants together. We're creating much more robust communities where we've got 5, 6, 7 plants all piled on top of one another, working together as a cohesive community, so that as one is just past its best, another one is just coming to its best. So there has to be a kind of an intimate understanding of the plant material. Hopefully that makes the management and maintenance of it much simpler, because there should be no need for staking. The density means there should be no weeding. There should be no feeding, because essentially we're harvesting the herbaceous material from the surface of the border at the end of the season, composting and then putting it back on at the beginning of the season, and that's all the nutrition the plants need. So what we're trying to do is to, in a way, use horticultural technology to engineer out all of those complexities which have traditionally been a real challenge to a long herbaceous border, especially one which is, how long is it again? Just remind me.
It's 120 metres
long.
So I think we end up with something like 800 square metres of planting space. I mean, it's boggling. It's in itself larger than anybody's back garden, and that's just the border down the side of the garden. So it really is a lot.
And it's by no means easy, because although we're on a south-facing site with the wall of St John's behind us, we've got overhanging trees. So we've got canopy drip, we've got shadow. Some plants are going to have to thrive in the sunshine, some in more deep shade. We've also got root ingress as well from the neighbouring trees. We've got a soil which traditionally dries out as soon as the sun hits it. I mean, even after all the rain we've been having in the last few weeks and months, standing on the water today, it's parched. There's just an extraordinary range of horticultural challenges in order to get to that point where we can all sit back on the opposite side of the lawn and, you know, drink a glass of Pimm's and say, yeah, that border looks quite special.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as well, I particularly love the things you're saying about sort of the use of the border and drawing people into it. I think one of our key considerations was about that accessibility as well, and the fact that people might actually not just be sitting on the lawns looking at the border, but they might be sitting almost within the border, looking at things and really being immersed in and close to plants. And I think getting people to do that in itself also changes the way they feel about plants and the way they feel about gardens. So I think that's another sort of very beautiful outcome of this redesign.
Trinity College head gardener Kate Burtonwood with our own Chris Beardshaw touring the herbaceous border on Trinity's North Lawn, recently redesigned by Chris. You're listening to Gardener's Question Time on Radio 4 and BBC Sounds with me, Peter Gibbs. Joining Chris Beardshaw on the panel today are Christine Wharton and Dr. Chris Thorogood. We're with an audience of keen gardeners inside the De Jager Auditorium at Trinity College, Oxford. Hello, audience! And which of you has our next question, please?
Hello, I'm Felicity Record from Wolvercote Horticultural Society. My peach tree has died. What can I replace it with? It's a windy, sunny spot in alkaline soil. I already have a lilac, a magnolia and a cherry, and I'd like some scent and some colour, please.
Okay, and are you thinking another tree or?
A tall shrub, or not a fruit tree, because it obviously doesn't do very well. It's a very windy path.
Okay. Chris Thorogood, what would you recommend?
I've just come back from Sicily, Felicity, and I saw the most wonderful plant growing wild that you occasionally see in gardens here, and it's called Cytisus etnensis, and it's the Mount Etna broom. So when we think of broom, or at least when I think of it, I think of that lovely sort of flash of yellow that you sometimes see on the roadside. But this is like that, but with more vavavoom. So it grows larger, almost the size of a small tree. It's bright yellow, if that's the colour that you might be after. And it's got, I don't know how to describe the fragrance. It's almost like a sort of coconutty smell, but it's really quite pleasant. And it's like a little sort of patch of sunshine in your garden. And I think it would really like those conditions, the windy, sunny conditions, the alkaline, probably free draining soil, I'm guessing, which would rather well replicate the conditions that it grows on Mount Etna in Sicily. So that would be my recommendation.
Slightly different climate, Chris?
But it does well here, actually. I've seen it growing very well. And I think also, yes, a different climate, but Mount Etna is high. Yeah. It does get cold up there.
Christine, what would you recommend?
I'm going to follow Christie's lead as talking about a plant that you would normally expect to be growing in this situation, and that's Cytisus battendieri, the pineapple or Moroccan broom. Beautiful, stunning silver foliage, and then the panicles of flowers, so groups of flowers that smell of pineapple. Now, if you look in old books, it's often suggested for a hot, south-sheltered side. Now, whoever invented that is their marbles looking at, because this is a plant that will take exposure and cold and is reliable. It can get quite large, but you can prune it. You often see it against the wall, but it makes a stunning freestanding shrub. So Cytisus battendieri or Moroccan. The fragrance is fantastic. It smells like you just opened a tin of pineapples and stuffed your nose in them.
What about you, Chris?
So I would say small trees, polite, well-branching, good listening, and very sweet fragrance. Nalis Toringo is a very good one. Nalis is a member of the apple family. Wonderful flowers at this time of the year. And colours up with good fruits, good reliable fruiting plants, ornament of the apple. You mentioned that you've got a magnolia, but if you could just treat yourself to one extra magnolia, and you need to just enrich the soil a little bit because it does need a sort of neutral soil rather than alkaline soil. Try and grow Magnolia Felix. Magnolia Felix has got the most enormous blooms on it. I mean, they are like that. He says, gesticulating at about 30 centimetres high. They're like 30 centimetre high, wonderful claret goblets. They are beautiful and just stunning, and very, very sweetly fragrant. And now you would need to either train it or keep it as a multi-stem, so prune it and keep it low in order to be able to appreciate. Otherwise, you'll be able to see the flowers, out of the first floor or possibly second floor window once it starts to grow. But Crataegus prunifolia would also be very good. Tough as old boots, nice foliage, glossy green foliage when it comes out, and good flowers, good fruiting. And I wouldn't ignore the pears either. Pyrochanticleer, from almost the first of the blossoming fruits in the UK. Pyrochanticleer, clear white blossom, very hardy, very tough. Prune it to all shapes and sizes. That's a real beauty as well.
Thank you. Did you say it's just the one plant you wanted, Felicity? You're going to have to make a bit more space to get those.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Lots of plant suggestions on today's programme, but you will find them all listed on the Gardeners Question Time pages of the Radio 4 website. Just look for the listing for this edition. And let's take another question.
Hello, I'm Chris Waite from Abingdon Horticultural Club and the Flower Club in Abingdon. Would you recommend the use of coir, the coconut fibre, and where would you use it, or how would you use it?
Okay. Christine, this is a substance that you tend to find in some of the peat-free composts now. Would you use it as just on its own, or
no?
Does it have uses?
I have tried it. I find it sits too wet with me. And I haven't managed to keep the moisture levels correct. it's a byproduct of the coconut industry. It comes from that part of the world, so there's implications associated with travel and all of that, whether it's sustainable or not. You could mix it in with your hanging basket compost, you could mix it in with your other compost. Some people use it as a mulch, but I find that it sits wet and that would worry me a bit. I'm not a great fan per se of coir, to be honest.
Okay. Chris, do you find a use for it in the botanic gardens?
Yeah, we have experimented with it, Chris, and like you suggested, we've used it as a substitute for peat, and so we've done lots of trials in the past growing different things, particularly carnivorous plants. They're a real challenge because you can't grow them in ordinary compost, and going peat-free is not straightforward for growing specialist plants such as those. So we have done trials. I think really it does depend on the plant, and it requires a little bit of patience and trial and error, I would say. So similar to Christine, I wouldn't say it's a straightforward substitute, but I think it's the right thing to be looking at alternatives to unsustainable things such as peat. So I applaud the question, thank you.
I think one of the things about coir is that it does stay very wet during the winter, but it dries out faster than you can believe during the summer. And so it makes managing the compost actually really difficult. And you can find that the top part of the pot has dried out, whilst the bottom is sopping wet. So it's not a great substitute on its own. So just adding fibre is fine, but not if that's the bulk of the growing medium that you're trying to use as a replacement for a peat-based compost. It's also, in addition to the issues in terms of how much water it holds on to or doesn't hold on to, it's also incredibly poor at holding on to nutrient. So one of the things about a peat-based compost, and one of the things that is celebrated, is that the nutrients are able to be held well by the peat-based composts and they're made available freely to plants. And what you tend to find with a coir-based compost is that the nutrients just swill straight through. And so as a consequence, given a rainy season like this, if you've been growing your plants outside in a coir-based compost, you can very often find that they're in nutrient deficit because all the nutrients just simply washed out. So it's about learning a new process, really, if you enter into that sort of market. I mean, they are very good, or it as a product is very good at making pots. So you very often find vegetables available at this time of the year in coir pots. That's great. It also makes a really good doormat as well into your, if you've got the sort of glass house that's regularly swept and, you're house proud about your glass house, it makes a good doormat. But in terms of a direct replacement for peat in a compost, I think it's a challenge. If you're looking for a direct substitution for peat, leaf mold is brilliant. Get yourself a leaf mold bin, make one, just some chicken wire. Fantastic. So if you've got one already, that's what you can be harvesting and mixing with your compost, because the nutrient holding capacity of leaf mold is superb, and it's very well regulated in terms of passage of water through the compost, and it's also rich in microorganisms, and it's those microorganisms which unlock the nutrients in the surrounding compost.
Our chickens really like leaf mould.
Yeah, mix some.
I won't be feeding it to my chickens.
Mix some chicken manure with your leaf mould, and you've got rocket fuel there. I mean, that's extraordinary.
I bet you don't have any slugs, Chris.
Thanks very much, Chris.
Thank you very
Interesting
much.
question. Thank you. Let's take another.
Felicity Butterfield from West Oxford. Should the need to provide more green vegetables arise, which of the hero plants we now compost or bin would the panel add to the dinner table?
What are you thinking of as a hero plant?
RHS decided that weeds were called hero plants, which I thought was rather a wonderful term. So I go around the garden going, oh, another hero plant, look at that, popping up all over the place.
Chris Beardshaw, fat hen, I think that's another one, isn't it? It's edible.
Yeah, fat hen, and you could also use something like sweet Sicily as well, the foliage and also the flower of sweet Sicily, and the root is also very good as well, wild garlic. And dandelions as well, but again, it's the very young foliage which is worth just harvesting and throwing on top of a salad dish. Most of the things that have fallen into the weed category have found themselves in a weed category for good good reason. They have either been out-competed by other plants, which are more nutritious, easier to grow, more tasty, etc., or they're a downright pest. And once you include them in the garden, it is very, very difficult to get rid of them.
If you think where we are in the cultivation of wild plants as far as edible crops, most of us have actually established what we like and what we don't. And there are reasons why we have that selected palate. Outside of that, there are often issues with it, and I wouldn't want bittercress all over my garden, however much I like a bittercress sandwich. It depends on where you are in life and how much space you've got. But there are, foraging, of course, it is where we utilise our knowledge for picking wild plants and weeds, etc., for diets. But, would you really want to be eating bittercress or ground elder week after week after week after week? And I think the answer to that is no.
No.
Tropilum majus nasturtiums might be useful to you. It's quite a particular flavour and not for everyone, that sort of tart, bitter flavour. But I think of that as a multi-purpose plant because it looks wonderful, I think, and it's useful for ground cover. The flowers are beautiful and the leaves are edible, as you possibly know. Another example that I think of as a multi-purpose plant might be something in the pea family, Fabaceae. So you've got fenugreeks as well as clovers, and the reason these plants are so useful and helpful to the gardener is that they actually fix nitrogen. So they have these rhizobia, bacteria in nodules, and if you actually dig up a clover or a related plant and you look at the roots, you'll notice these little yellowish lumps on there, and that's what those are doing. And so they actually capture the nitrogen from the atmosphere and then sort of hold it in the soil that benefits the other plants. And so you may have heard of a green manure, for example, and you can grow some of these plants that you can harvest if they're edible plants, but they also do something good for the soil. So another thought I had is I haven't grown it, but tiger nut, Cyperus esculentus, it's like a little sedge-like plants that you can grow. It's often grown in the Mediterranean, and that produces these, I think they're sometimes called earth almonds as well, and they're edible, but I've not grown them myself. I don't know if Chris or Christine you have, but maybe give that a try and let us know how you get on with this.
Well, I will. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Felicity. And who has our final question, please?
Hi, my name's Sarah Calcutt. I have an allotment in South Oxford at Cowmead. I love raspberries, and I enthusiastically planted a load of raspberries, thinking whoopee. They are now invading the raised beds that my husband carefully built, and we're having a terrible time trying to get rid of them. I'm just wondering, is there a way of controlling them a bit? At the moment, we're just trying to dig them out, which is really, really hard work.
Okay.
Any tips?
Christine.
Blood, sweat and tears.
That's what I thought.
Basically. You will leave a bit in, you propagate them by root cuttings, basically you can do it by root cuttings, and any damaged particle of root will shoot up and will roll and the rest of it. So it's literally physical removal.
I thought you'd say that.
Sorry.
Is there a case then, Chris, for having some restriction around it? Actually,
if you were, I'm quite interested to know do I have to dig them all? Could I keep a few?
Go down them underneath. I've got them from next door.
They're related to brambles.
No, I know.
And it really is a case, once they're happy, of treating them as if they are a bramble, really. And just as Christine says, blood, sweat and tears to get rid of them. Sarah, what else are you trying to grow in the raised bed alongside these raspberries?
We've got a lovely bed of asparagus in the bed that hasn't been invaded.
Asparagus could be quite a good competitor, I'd have thought. Generally, the things that you're trying to grow, because once an asparagus gets established, the shoots that we eat are soft and succulent, but the mature plant, as you know, is quite a tough old thing. So I think you're choosing the right thing to grow alongside it. So really, I think it is just a case of managing it. But I hope you at least get a good crop from them.
Not really, no.
Oh. How long have they been in?
Probably about 4 years.
Now that's interesting.
And they're really...
Then if you're not getting a good crop, I wonder if the soil is particularly rich in nitrates, which is encouraging a flush of leafy growth and getting the stems really going, but it's not investing in the right way in its flowers and then its fruits, which is what you want from it. So can I just ask about, do you feed them anything?
We have hens.
Okay,
We
then I
have
think,
fed them with
then I think that is the thing.
with their
what's going
manure.
Yeah, and that's very rich in nitrates. So
Yeah.
I think we may have established the problem. I imagine what's happening is that your raspberries are a little too happy. They're thriving on the high level of nitrates from the manure from the chickens, and that's causing them to put out lots and lots of runners and leafy growth. But it's not being compensated for by the flowers and then the fruits, which would come from a high potassium or potentially phosphorus feed. Goodness, all these chickens. If you could try and limit the amount of chicken manure that's reaching those raspberries, if that's at all possible.
Yes, we can. Yeah.
I think that might help.
I think one of the interesting things that you might want to explore is the way that one plant might suppress the growth of another plant. So not exactly acting as a herbicide or a pesticide, but certainly able to make a plant really struggle, make a neighbouring plant really struggle. So for instance, traditionally walnuts, and the growth of raspberries and walnuts in traditional gardens is really frowned upon because the walnut exudes chemicals into the soil via its roots, but also via the decaying foliage, and they are known to suppress a whole range of things. But one of the things that's particularly spoken about in Victorian gardening books is raspberries, and you might also want to look at ailanthus as well, Ailanthus ailantissima, which is the most fantastic tree. It's a big tree, but that also has the same ability to be able to suppress plants in its neighborhood, and that's not because it's removing nutrients or because it's changing the environment in terms of light and moisture. It's because of the chemicals which are being emitted into the soil, which suppresses.
I think we're not allowed to kind of plant big trees in the allotment or get kind of boosted out.
Well, what you can do is you can make tea from the foliage. If you know someone who's got, for instance, a walnut tree, and you gather the foliage of the walnut and then you steep it in exactly the same way as you would comfrey or tea, then you can water that on, and that has a very similar effect. And it's a very natural process. So for instance, a mature oak tree will suppress the germination of seedlings of the same species via the same process. So it's the release of chemicals into the ground, which is controlling other plants.
I should clarify that's tea, not for consumption.
I mean, you might not want to drink walnut tea. I mean, it would be a very good alternative to self-tanning. So you don't need to go to the tanning studio if you've got walnut tea, because you do come out a slightly kind of murky bronze blotchier.
We've taken some interesting routes for that question, Sarah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, that's all we got time for on this visit to Trinity College, part of Oxford University. Thank you to everyone inside the Diego Auditorium for looking after us so well, and thank you for listening at home. Next week, we're back at the RHS Chelsea Flower Show, where we'll have our very own garden space across the whole week inside the Great Pavilion. So if you're planning a visit to Chelsea, come and say hello to the GPT team, where we're going to be holding one-on-one sessions with some familiar names. But until then, from me, Peter Gibbs, the panel, Christine Wharton, Chris Beardshaw and Dr. Chris Thorogood, it's goodbye and may the weather be with you.
Garden's Question Time was produced by Dan Cocker. The assistant producer was Ronnie Prescott, and it's a Something Else production for BBC Radio 4. Well, we've got a short story about a mystery illness in just a moment. First, though, Matthew Bannister is here to tell us about Last Word.
On this week's programme, Dame Shirley Conrad, a journalist and author best known for her books Superwoman and Lace. Baroness Doreen Massey, the educator and former director of the Family Planning Association. Beverly LaHaye, the founder of Concerned Women of America, who campaigned to stop the Equal Rights Amendment. And Steve Albini, the controversial musician who produced many influential albums, including Nirvana's In Utero. They're all coming up after the news at 4.
That's in 15 minutes. Now, though, in short works, Hayley Atwell reads An Affliction, a new story from Lottie Mills, the winner of the 2020 BBC Young Writers Award, whose first collection, Monstrum, is published this week.
The sickness begins on a Thursday, an unextraordinary, lukewarm morning in March. The nurses wake Katie Craven to find that her eyes have turned yellow. Gold, really. Every speck of them Midas touched and blazing, even in the spaces where the whites are. pupils are the most unnerving thing of all. They have been stretched vertically, 2 slits from lid to lid, inhuman. Later, the remaining nurses will muse on the strangeness of Katie being the first to show signs. A quiet, obedient child, appropriately unattractive, with her coarse orange hair, her jagged, rot-puckered teeth. Unfortunate, they had always called her, rolling the word across their tongues, savouring the guilty, irresistible cruelty of it. They remark that Katie herself seems unaware of the transformation. They suppose Katie, who was more or less mute, to be unaware of most things. They do not see the way her eyes dart to a basin of water, a window pane, the cracked mirror in the corner of the senior dormitory, the way they catch sight of their own reflection, pounce on the live, warm, twitching image of it. They have made a fatal misjudgment. Katie is not unaware. What Katie is unsurprised. When breakfast is come and gone, the eyes show no sign of returning to their usual state. The doctor is gone. He is quick to arrive, marching up the drive of the St. Francis Invalid Colony with artful efficiency. He glances up at the building as he approaches. This place has always held a peculiar beauty to him, all right angles and uniform brick. It bears none of the infirmity of its occupants, none of their unsightly defects. Inside, it is the same story. He glances admiringly at the neat lines of girls as they are escorted from lesson to lesson, unruly bodies corralled into order by stiff uniforms and stiffer discipline. Any hint of noise, a stifled giggle, an involuntary shriek, is swiftly corrected. It's no cure, of course. Nothing could be. But here, at least, their infirmities are safely contained. To the doctor, there is nothing more beautiful. When did this begin? He asks the matron as he steps into the infirmary. He does not speak to Katie. He can't seem to hold her gaze. Early this morning, the matron says. Is it jaundice, doctor? All the nurses admire the doctor tremendously. He is young, but upright, tidy and sun, neatly parted hair and a suit of dishwater tweed. A man of breathtaking, irresistible ordinariness. He takes a small torch from his pocket and flicks it back and forth across Katie's eyes. They flash, as hard and cold as mirrors. A warning. Before he can reply, there is a snort of laughter from the doorway. That's not jaundice. It's followed by a chorus of thumps and shuffles as the speaker moves into the room. He takes in the imprint of the girl's afflictions, the tiptoed drag of the feet, the reckless sway of her torso from side to side. Her clothes sit strangely on her, the usual white pinafore pulled tight over bulging, uncooperative flesh, the incongruously girlish frilled collar, an adult body wrangled into the costume of a child. Alice, the matron scolds, you should be in chapel, young lady. Alice pays her no attention. Even her unsteady body betrays not the slightest flinch. It's not jaundice, she says again. Jaundice doesn't give you fox eyes. Fox eyes. The doctor is struck by the description, by its brutal accuracy. Alice Willoughby, the matron snaps again. Chapel, now. Alice keeps the doctor pinned with her gaze. Then her face splits open into a feral grin. She lets her tongue protrude and runs it along the front of her teeth in a defiant, ravenous gesture. It's brief, but it's enough to render the doctor uneasy all the same, because her teeth are awfully sharp. Alice returns to the infirmary straight after chapel. A great cacophony heralds her arrival. The percussion percussive thump of her feet punching the floorboards. This time, she's not alone. A younger girl, perhaps 12 years old, trails from her hand, a pale, quiet shadow. They come to an abrupt stop before the doctor, and he takes in the curtained white hair which hangs loose to the girl's elbows, her sightless eyes as Alice guides her into place. "Show him something," she says. Her voice is commanding. She seems almost to be showboating. Sophie lifts one hand up towards her collarbone. The doctor notices that her fingers are webbed, translucent, barely bare skin, as delicate as lace. Then, bashfully, she tugs her hair back and lifts her chin, exposing her neck. It takes the doctor a moment to understand what exactly he is seeing, to grapple with his reeling horror, his reflexive surge of disbelief, to make sense of the inhuman shape, the two sets of swollen ridges which flare and spasm with each breath. Gills. It is catching, he thinks. It must be. He knows a contagion when he sees one, knows a house set alight by sickness, even such a strange sickness as this. The quarantine is first. The infected girls, Katie, Sophie, and Alice, of course, are shut into the infirmary. Only the doctor is allowed in and out, and even he keeps a distance, tries not to breathe their air. Sophie looks awfully small, in that hushed white room, drowning in her too big borrowed nightgown. Katie is harder to make out, perched on a windowsill in the farthest corner, her alien, scar-shaped pupils fixed on the distant woods beyond the window. Alice is the strangest of all. She lays flat on her back on the floor, a luxurious sprawl, arms flung out, sharp teeth bared at the ceiling. Every so often, she'll laugh. It's a grotesque, consuming sound. It ricochets around the infirmary and racks Alice's body in hysterical spasms. The doctor looks down at her. He says nothing, but his lips shift as he runs his tongue along his own blunt, uniform teeth. The other girls he can pity at a distance, but there is something about Alice he dislikes. He feels a wild, irrepressible kind of disgust as he studies the chaos of her body. If he was a bolder man, he might even call it hatred. Outside, the nurses begin the examinations. Every inhabitant of the colony is lined up along the corridor, as they would be for a nit check or a spoonful of cod liver oil. The nurses pick through their hair, feeling along their scalps for budding, velvety horns, measuring claw-sharp nails, startling at the slithering emergence of a long, forked tongue. The sickness has torn through the senior girls' dormitory and the older women's villas. Some of the youngest children seem unaffected, but only a few. Soon the infirmary is seething with it, a yelping, scratching, howling mass of uncontrollably mutating bodies. Barely enough floor space to hold them all. A carnival of chaos. Many tear their uniforms apart, white pinafores shredded to ribbons. Some clamber atop the bed frames with new and terrifying strength. Others leap and swing from the light fittings, shatter the gaslights into lethal confetti as they screech with laughter. Katie Craven, her eyes still yellow as plague, has begun to dance, weaving her arms through the chaos in a silent ballet. The doctor finds his eyes drawn to a spot of stillness, a focal point of solidity amongst the blur. Alice. She is not joining with the others, not as such. She stands right in the thick of it all, eyes fluttering to a close, nose twitching as she catches the delectable scent of the doctor's panic. She takes it all in, an artist absorbing her great masterwork. She is flush with absolute delicious satisfaction. without quite meaning to, the doctor seizes her shoulders, shaking hard. "What is this?" he cries. "How do we stop it?" She regards him with a kind of disinterest, as if he is barely there at all. It maddens him, so he locks his hand around her arm and drags her towards the door of the infirmary. It's a struggle, and she claws at him with unrestrained rage. But for the moment, he has the upper hand. As he passes the matron, he spits his orders, and she, with pale-faced, terrible resolve, obeys. It has been a long time since he performed an extraction. The tools sit uneasily in his hands. Alice is before him, chin high and proud. She is held down by the nurses, 3 of them in fact. He can hear a strange sound, a distant keening. Another girl, another procedure. Scales being scraped and prized from skin. Or a declawing, perhaps. He looks at Alice again, at her locked shut jaw. The muscles of her face writhe and tick with the force of it. "Open wide," he says. Even to his own ears, the words are jarring. Too cloying, too childlike. Alice's eyes flash with amusement. A horrible, hungry glint. Her mouth does open, terrifyingly, unnaturally vast, a wolf's maw. It engulfs his hand completely. Her teeth rest around his wrist, teasingly light. "Please," he whimpers. Another muffled wail echoes from next door. Alice's eyes are locked on his own. Then her teeth clamp down, and his world turns white. The house is empty now. The doctor can feel it before he even opens his eyes. The eerie vacancy of a building drained of occupants. An architectural corpse. He isn't aware of much else, just the shocking wetness of his own blood, and a startling absence somewhere around his right wrist. He has been left on a bed. Someone has pulled the bedsheets to cover him, tucking him in tightly, a mockery of comfort. In a bleary corner of his vision, he can see the dormitory door. He knows, without checking, that it will be locked. All is silent. No more stumbling feet drag across the floorboards. But outside, if he listens carefully, he can hear the distant stampede. The woods alive and wild with brand new creatures. Far away, a wolf howls to the open sky.
An Affliction by Lottie Mills was read by Hayley Atwell, edited by Di Spears, and produced by Justine Willett. The news is next, and then afterwards it's Last Word, and at 4:30, Life Changing.
I'm Tim Harvey, and here at More or Less we weekly guide to the numbers and statistics of news and life.
London's average rent is expected to soar to £2,700.
6.5 billion animals pass through the airport, only the richest 4% of the population is affected by these stats. Is this not really the case? When those numbers don't seem to add up, we hit functional calculations. No question or number is too big or too small. A new series of More or Less with me, Tim Harvey, starts next Wednesday morning at 9. So no need call and Mrs.
BBC News at 4 o'clock. Chancellor Jeremy Hunt has said he'd like to make another cut to national insurance before the general election if the government can afford it. He said Labour would need to increase taxes to meet their spending commitment, but that was denied by the Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves. James Smith of the Resolution Foundation says whoever wins the next election will have some difficult decisions to make.
Both main parties are trying to sound like they're not going to put up taxes. The Conservatives are going further by actually cutting taxes Home Office opening up, all of which are extremely difficult to deliver.
The world's top men's golfer, Scotty Scheffler, is facing 4 charges, including assaulting a police officer after being arrested on his way to the second day of the PGA Championship in Kentucky. The American was handcuffed and detained for a short time. He blamed what he called a big misunderstanding about traffic control measures after an earlier unrelated accident. The number of people who've fallen ill with cryptosporidium after drinking contaminated water in South Devon has risen to 46. The boss of South West Water has said she's truly sorry. Hundreds of Border Force officers at Heathrow Airport are to take more strike action in a dispute over rosters. The Public and Commercial Services Union said more than 500 of its members would walk out between the 31st of May and June the 2nd. An asylum seeker from Morocco who killed a stranger in Hartlepool has been sentenced to life in prison and told he'll serve at least 45 years. Ahmed Alid stabbed 70-year-old Terence Carney 6 times last October. Alid told police the attacks were in revenge for the war in Gaza. And the British Museum says it's recovered another 268 missing artefacts. Almost half the 1,500 items it revealed last year had been stolen have now been found. BBC News.
This is BBC Radio 4. A few years ago, a pair of twin sisters travelled to Mexico for a special holiday together. One hot day, they went for a swim in a lagoon, but found themselves in a terrifying fight for survival. We'll find out what happened in Life Changing at 4:30. Now, though, it's Last Word with Matthew Bannister.
On Last Word this week, 2 women with very different views on sex education in schools. Baroness Doreen Massey, who believed it should be taught to all children from the ages of 5 to 18, and Beverly LaHaye, the American evangelical campaigner who believed it had no place on the curriculum. Also, the controversial musician Steve Albini, who produced many influential albums, including Nirvana's In Utero. But first, Dame Shirley Conrad was the journalist and author who had a huge success with her book Superwoman. It was published in 1975, and according to Dame Shirley's son Sebastian, it was a practical guidebook for the modern woman.
Well, it was a completely new approach. It wasn't Mrs. Beeton. It wasn't, this is how to be the perfect wife. This is how to get the most out of life and enjoy your life, how to live happy and productive lives, rather than, being an unpaid slave, as it were.
Any woman who has to cope with a home these days and children is a superwoman because she had to be. I mean, superwoman is an ironic title. As a matter of fact, it's for whoever has to do the system support work in the house, man, woman or child.
My mother was an incredibly practical person. At an early age, I was taught how to change a plug, mend a fuse, and how to sew, how to cook.
The third possibility is to juggle a job and children, which is what I do. My boys may have answers to my work and help me. Sebastian is the family maintenance man. I think I can. Jasper does all the washing up. He actually enjoys it.
The phrase, life's too short to stuff a mushroom, which she coined, must have absolutely rung around her readers' minds and thought, yes, at last, somebody's articulating how we feel.
Yeah, I mean, what's the point of ironing sheets, if you're only going to sleep on them? And we have just so many hours in the day, and why not use our hours sensibly, She came from an era where women weren't generally taught to use their brains, and she was a very bright person who liked to use her time productively. Every day was a new project for us as children, and we're going to be doing something, and so I get this, how to live one's life productively. I think it was very important things. Don't waste your time doing unproductive things, like stuffing mushrooms.
Was she pleasantly surprised by how successful it was and how well it did?
I think she was pleased how well it did, and the salient quality of it all. I mean, it really did. It was outstanding stuff.
And I was quite interested to notice that, Beethoven and having children, more men and also they read it and know about it. I think it's most commendable that men have so much moved into the women's field in the home in the last 20 years, and women still grumble that they don't do enough, but after all, how much of man's work in the household do women do? I don't see many women at school doing it.
Shirley was born in 1932. Her father ran a dry cleaning business. Shirley was sent to the prestigious St Paul's Girls' School in London.
My mother was always very proud of the fact that she's a Paulina and all the friends she made at St Paul's, and she kept contact with St Paul's all through her life.
What do you think she learned there that stood her in good stead later in life?
A sense of independence, and clearly after the war, and a lot of women realised that they had to fight their corner, and so a sense of self-worth and a sense of equality of the genders.
After leaving St Paul's, Shirley spent a year at finishing school in Switzerland before returning to London. Shortly afterwards, she met and married the designer Terence Conrad, who was about to start his Habitat furniture business.
He was very charismatic, he was highly intelligent. In many ways, they were very similar.
And they were both significant figures at the time in what was going on in London and in a way in British society, were they not?
They worked together. She was a designer, she had studied textile design, he studied textile design, and she helped a lot in the creation of the business. I mean, they really were.
used some of the proceeds to buy a chateau near Cannes. She wrote a number of other novels, and later in her life launched charities aimed at encouraging girls to study maths. This led to her being awarded a Danewood for services to maths education. But did she ever reconsider her most famous piece of advice? Shirley Conrad has died aged 91. Well, now we cross the Atlantic to remember someone whose views were diametrically opposed of Shirley Conrad.
I'm Beverly LaHaye, founder and president of Concerned Women for America, the nation's largest grassroots organization, and we are pro-woman, we are pro-family, we are pro-life.
Beverly LaHaye was an anti-feminist activist and a prominent figure in American conservative politics for decades. In 1979, she founded the organization Concerned Women for America, which championed introducing what they called biblical principles into areas of policy. The highest echelons of political life.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here, a tremendous honor to address one of the most legendary in American politics. That's what you become, and that's a very big statement. The Concerned Women for America, a very big statement.
Beverly was born in 1929 in a working-class suburb of Detroit, on the cusp of the Great Depression. When her mother fell ill and became bedridden, the teenage Beverly took on the care of her two siblings. Dr. Emily Suzanne Johnson is an associate professor of history at Ball State University in Muncie, Indiana. Says these experiences influenced Beverly's views on family life.
When she becomes an adult, and a politicized adult in the 70s, and she sees feminists arguing for what looks to her like the horrible childhood that she had, with both parents working and children taking on more responsibility, she sees this as an existential threat to America and to the American family.
At the age of 17, Beverly met Tim LaHaye. A year later, Tim became an influential pastor, and for a time Beverly worked behind the scenes, fulfilling the duties of church secretary and running the Sunday school. But it was the rise of the feminist movement in the 1960s and 70s that put her into the spotlight. The campaign for an equal rights amendment to the US Constitution that would outlaw discrimination on the grounds of sex was gathering momentum. Beverly wanted to stop it.
Beverly LaHaye talks about hearing Eddie Friedan, famous American feminist, on the radio. LaHaye says she was for all women in America, and they couldn't let that stand.
We did not have a voice. When the feminists spoke, they spoke, as they said, for the women of America, and we are not a single block group of women. There are large bodies of women out there, such as we've got in this audience today, who did not agree at all with the feminists.
It really would have just said that the states cannot make a law that discriminates on the basis of sex. But conservative women read this in the context of the feminist movement, and they're very much imagining a world in a framework of a man who makes more money and a woman who stays at home. And it almost passes through the whole process and then gets stopped as anti-feminist women take up this cause.
How much influence do you think she had in terms of changing the political landscape, in terms of changing public opinion?
I don't want to overstate this, but I really think that the movement is completely different, not just in the 70s, but today, because of the impact that Beverly LaHaye had. So when she founded Concerned Women for America, she's able within 18 months to set up local organizations for Concerned Women for America all over the country.
Did she get the ear of President Reagan, for example?
Yes. So she first meets President Reagan because he meets with her husband, Tim LaHaye, but she eventually develops a relationship with President Reagan sort of separately, and she does this really canny thing of being sort of the consummate housewife, always, even in political spaces.
In just a few short years, you've become the largest politically active women's organization in the nation. A lot of the credit, of course, has to go to one woman. She's one of the powerhouses on the political scene today, and one of the reasons that the grassroots are more and more a conservative province, Because of her, the great majority of women once again have a voice in the issues of the day. Beverly LaHaye is changing the face of American politics, and she deserves our thanks and congratulations.
Even when she is literally meeting with the president in the White House, she has all of this talent for making people feel comfortable and listened to and respected, and practicing a kind of soft power that women, maybe especially pastors' wives, have to practice, of influencing people without making it feel like an argument.
The scripture clearly says that the mother is to train the beloved children, is to be a homemaker, and the father is to be the one